there are tensions of contrasting poles or contrasting things everywhere. But then there are even more, and a lot more from what we've seen. Actually, can we have เราสามารถจะฉายเป็นภาพเนี่ยเป็นภาพหนังสือหรือภาพอะไรที่ไม่ใช่คำว่า ASA Forum ได้ไหมคะขอนิดนึงได้ไหมคะ I'm just asking. Yeah.
Is that a question for me?
No. I would like to change like the background into something that we're rather other than the other ones. Yeah. But anyhow,
I think this is good.
I'm particularly interested in these different poles, the contrasting positions. And first of all, I have to say that you write the line and the in-between line between these tensions really, really beautifully. I was thinking originally of, say, beginning with the name of your firm. It's not a firm even. Rural urban framework. It's rural and then it's urban. And then you teach, and then you practice research and design. And then there are more, like the seemingly or deceptively even simple outlook of your projects. But then they come when we actually understand the process and the inside of these projects, we understand that they are actually very complex in nature. And then there are projects that seem poetic at the outlook, but then very sensible at the core. So these seemingly contrasting positions are really inspiring in a way. But what is most interesting to me at this moment is the tension between design and research. And you mentioned earlier that your project is kind of not research or design research in a sense, in a traditional sense, that you research and then you design. But then these are using design as a way to do research. I'm interested in the result of these projects. What would be the research outcome? How would they actually affect the community as you inserted these buildings in the communities?
I think if you're describing a person, you could call them, there's a clinical term, which is schizophrenia. These multiple personalities and things. But so just to answer that comment first, from my perspective and my partners, we're a little bit lazy people, and we try to conserve our energy. So everything we do, everything we do, I think makes sense in relation to itself. What you see is a multitude of different things, but it's also an attempt to try to do one thing and to kill a lot of different birds with one stone, actually. And that's how I see things. That's why the teaching has to relate, to the real projects. Teaching for me is a way of learning and practicing being an architect. I think you could call our unit, you could call it a practice. Not a practice in a formal sense, but practice is what we do, We literally try to practice. There's no teaching, there's no research, just practicing and practicing design. Why, people always ask, why did we go into the rural? There was no choice in the matter. It was simply that it was a problem. I see myself as a contemporary architect working with a contemporary problem. Right. And I think in one sense, I think it's very focused because rather than doing, hotels and this is how things does work, is that on one hand, one of the big challenges of being an architect is if you do a hotel, then everyone wants you to do hotels, and then you become the kind of, hotel architect or the hospital architect. We also approach it in a sense that we want to do one problem. We want to work in one place, which is this kind of process of urbanization. We want to work with villages, which are politically very clear, and how we want to work. So all our projects, I think, could be tied to this. However, one of the great things is then we are not constrained within a single program.
Exactly.
And it's opened up to us to do a hospital, to do a school. And that opens it up, and it becomes a process of also learning from these different programs and trying to understand them and to develop new typologies which we can leave in place but begin to inform the fact that, the thousands of hospitals in China are all built the same way.
Right.
So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I think there's another way of looking at things in which is it's very, very singular what we do, because I think we're addressing a singular problem. Now with teaching or you said research and design.
Research and design.
That's a question. I wish my partner was here because he believes in research. I usually say I don't know what research is. I believe in problem solving, in problem invention. And so, in that sense, like the house, for me the approach is, what house would I build if I, had the same amount of money, if I moved there and I had to build a house? These are the materials I would use. These are the people I would talk to. This is how I would find out, how to do things. I think it's nicer to erase the line between research and design. Like design is a kind of curiosity, you could say.
Yeah, I mean, if you say that all of this is partly research, it's the liveliest piece of research that I've encountered in some time. I mean, looking at the kids, I mean, lots of your projects involve users that are youngsters, and the way that you show us how they interact in the space, in the buildings, those are kind of a way to remind us of the role of architects in a way. No matter where you are in the world, it's finally not about you, it's more about them in a way. So thank you for that. Yeah. But then you sorry?
No, it just occurred to me something, because I'm processing things all the time, and I suddenly realized, I think the reason for me, I don't really think in terms of the word research. I don't know if I used it a few times. However, is because I think conventionally we think about research as something where you kind of acquire knowledge and then action comes afterwards. You research something for a company to do something else.
Right.
I think architecture is about destroying that line and just going straight to the action, in some sense. Sorry.
But it was no. You mentioned that the starting point, perhaps, like why you go into communities, go into the rural areas, and it struck me as something unexpected as well. I mean, given your background, like going to Cooper Union, and then like teach in, say, a European in Denmark, then coming back to Hong Kong, coming to Hong Kong, and going to this area, this single problem of the urbanization of rural area. What's the journey? How come? Like, why is that?
Would it help you if I said my grandparents were farmers in Taiwan? But actually, that's not really the motivation. I often describe myself as a kind of professional immigrant, from Taiwan to growing up in the U.S. working in Denmark. You described it.
Yeah.
But I think it's because it's important to see the local and to work in the local as an architect from the perspective of an outsider. I think it's not only a possibility, it also gives a different kind of vantage point.
Right.
And it's a wonderful profession because it allows for deep engagement as well as insight. You know, that you can work anywhere in the world. In fact, it's very effective if you're not from there. You know, if you work, you do your own, you know, your neighbor's house.
Yeah.
I think it's a different kind of problem. You go like, you know, 1,000 miles somewhere. And it's a way of distancing and then also then working very closely at the same time.
Right.
Yeah, so it was simply the problem that I believe is one of the most urgent ones for architecture to solve. That's what I'm trying to describe here, is that it's a urgent architectural problem.
Right.
Because there are so many solutions that don't involve or have anything to do with design. And it's not like I'm trying to, you know, solve it with, like, this is the hospital. But at least it's a very different approach because all you have is this old stuff or this generic stuff.
Right. Yeah, it's very. What's refreshing for me is that you seem to approach each project as if it's a problem to be solved, but then the creativity and the fresh view that you give to each project is really inspiring. But anyhow, instead of dominating the conversation, I would like to ask for questions from the floor. Is there any? Can we have some light in the room, please? Thank you. ค่ะคำถามมีไหมคะเชิญค่ะจะเขียนขึ้นมาหรือจะลุกขึ้นถามก็ได้นะคะยกมือได้เลยค่ะ Any questions เชิญค่ะป๊อกค่ะ
Hello. Hi. Thank you very much for showing us very inspiration for your works. After I look at your projects, I have one quick question. It may sound like a stupid question, but I have to ask you. It's about your
only answer stupid questions.
Okay.
The smart ones are.
It's about your first house, the house you showed me, and I wonder why you didn't like the family C, because you know they are the only one that like your design, and they keep asking you to live in this house.
Oh,
but you say they're not the kind of family that you want. So I wonder whether you can clarify that.
It was the only family that didn't need a house. I think.
Because they have their own house.
You have to read in between the lines. Yeah, they were actually quite well off in the village. You know, so I guess I'm just mentioning that story because of how politics affects architecture, how you have to work within it, how as an architect you can navigate politically. When we went there, they wanted to build a big pipeline of water, and it was only to save themselves from the mountains, from a kind of reservoir down to the village. That was the urgent need. And it was only because they wanted to avoid paying small government fees for their water, you know. So, you know, we went all the way there. And then with the charity, we walked around, we talked to people, we did more investigation, and that's only then that we came with the idea of doing a sample house. So it was not only a house of self-reliance, it also required that if they should gain anything from our activity, they would have to, you know, do it themselves, you know, as like means of being more resourceful in terms of retaining water, you know, et cetera, right? So that's why I describe it as a project of education, you know, a bottom-up approach. Versus the other one, which is a village, you know, we did the whole village, but sometimes you have to also prove, you have to prove that something works somehow. And so in the other village, we have this donation in order to invest in that, that process to, show a working model to the government, on a large scale. Yeah, so. But both are about the common good in different ways, and I hope you can see that. I think that's really the idea, the common good as employed through the individual versus the common good as a kind of community. It's always about the tension between the individual and the community, I guess you could say.
Any more questions? ค่ะเชิญค่ะ Oh, please.
Hi. Yeah. I'm a practicing architect not from here, from Bangladesh.
Oh, I was just there.
You were there? When was that?
A few months ago, they had this conference in Dhaka. Anyways, please.
Okay. Anyway, I was referring to the two projects we are showing. One was the shelter, and the other was the library. I'm sure you worked with the community, and that's about the sustainability of the architecture. I was wondering the material you used, were those local? Because the wood, the plank looked like factory made. Were they local, or you had to import it from long away? And question number 2 is, how would those interior behave during winter? Because I saw some snow and ice outside, so it would be an inclement weather during the winter. How would they behave? Do you use mechanical heating, or you have innovated some kind of other sustainable passive sort of heating? That's about it. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, they were from close or far away, I don't know, as close as Siberia. It's Russian timber. And the reason it's from Russia is because it's very cheap to get timber there. But the factory that we work with is a local factory. And they are a partner, actually. It's not somebody we hired to build it, because we could not find anybody who would, who would want to make such a complicated thing. They have their models of, earning income. It's a factory that wanted to expand its ability, its skill, its belief in kind of timber structures, timber house in China. Right now the timber factory usually does kind of very superficial things like fences and cladding on top of concrete buildings or paving, timber decks. So what was important was that over 3 years we developed a means of working together, and then the project was a means of just trying to elevate, to do it in order, to be able to do some complex, more difficult work. So there was that. There was this kind of our own investigation, our own desires, And then there was, of course, trying to serve the community. In this respect, I would say that it's very important, not just to serve the community, because I think architecture has some measure in which the architects, I always use this word and I get into a lot of trouble for it, the architect's ego, because I get invited to conferences where it's all about giving back. But I believe that in order for architecture to be effective, then it has to be powerful. It has to stand alone. It has to almost become a symbol. Like in this village, right? When you approach them with this design, or try not to show too much information at first, if they knew what they were getting into, they probably wouldn't have done it in the first place. But afterwards, they really rallied around it. It became the monument for this, for them, for the symbol for this reconstruction effort. They couldn't wrap their heads around what it was at first, because they simply cannot understand it. So then this is where kind of your own belief as an architect becomes very important. Yeah, so it's fulfilling, I think, navigating between this balancing desire, that a belief of bringing the ability to bring all these people and resources together into a single entity. It requires quite great desire to do that. Yeah. So, the answer to your second question is very simple. That's not snow. It's very hot there.
Okay. So
Yeah, extremely.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, but it's, yeah.
Right. มีคำถามท่านไหนสนใจค่ะเชิญค่ะข้างๆค่ะ
I'm the landscape architect. I'm interested in the community work as well. I would like to ask about how involved is each community that you work with. Do they have any opinions on your designs? For example, the mirrors, tiles that you use in your designs. Did they have any input or feedback, or how did you work around to get people's acceptance to your designs?
Which example did you state?
The mirror tiles you use.
The reflective.
Yes.
Yeah. We wait till the government official is, away on a business trip, and then we put them up really, really fast. And then when he comes back, he thinks it's pretty cool. Yeah, the community is very involved. These projects, I believe, would not be possible. It's part of the complexity of the problem itself, and the working process, and something for me of my own satisfaction with doing these things. Yeah. But again, I think it's difficult. I think it's very dangerous to separate the idea of community projects and non-community projects, or commercial projects and non-commercial projects. For me, this is all architecture. It's all about a singular desire to bring value through form, to create spaces, rich, interesting, valuable spaces that allow for people to imagine things beyond. And you could say I'm very naive in this regard because I never left school. But for me, it's about that constant reminder of the sort of the fundamental or essential cause of architecture, its role. That's why I like to look at this kind of vernacular things, not to worship it or to distance myself from it, but to just see that out of this tradition, we are still doing fundamentally the same thing. And bringing value through form is something, I think, very, very radical in the world today.
Actually, that's very interesting because when you speak of community projects or vernacular architecture, certain people would either kind of like romanticizing it, or would kind of negating or distance themselves away from it. So this is once again like an in-between position, which is what caught me when sitting down there listening to you would be that it's really nice to hear someone approach community projects without romanticizing or touching only the poetic side of it.
Oh,
right?
yeah, it's not romantic at all.
Yeah,
It's a
at all.
total
I mean,
pain in the ass.
Yeah, but what
I mean, seriously, let's like,
Yeah, you're saying it
let's
like
be truthful.
matter of factly and probably like kind of almost like problem solving kind of matter. But then, as you said yourself, it's almost like a strong form or logic outside. But then there's certain warmth to the language as well. And we were talking earlier about the way that you use Oh, brick. Brick is almost like the materials of the day right now, because at least 3 architects in this forum would be like, or would be known or talking about bricks, right? But anyhow, I was thinking about the form. You didn't describe any of this primarily as form making process, except perhaps towards the end. So I was wondering.
It's all, yeah.
Yeah,
No,
I was
no,
wondering.
It's
yeah.
all about the form. Yeah.
Yeah. So if it's all about the
Absolutely.
form, what would be the things, or the main concerns, or the inspiration that inform the forms?
Yeah. Okay. You know what? Maybe it's not all about the form. It's all about architecture. You know, and architecture requires form. It's the container. I'm not a brick guy. I'm not that interested in brick. But I would say something about brick, which I find very, very fascinating, is that it's a material which is the most common, and then there's certain periods, like in England, in which the craft of brick was used to express the sort of highest levels of attainment. So it's this kind of incredibly simple element that spans and bridges and breaks these kind of boundaries of,
Right.
in terms of socially, and also economically. And that's kind
Right.
of what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
I'm really, really interested in the idea that in doing things which are bigger than yourself, like going with students to build something in 6 days that requires 70 students in order to build it in 6 days. Not because you just bring a bunch of people, and that's the only thing of the issue with community, which is the certain things can only be accomplished through a collective of people. So architecture fundamentally, I guess, is like this. You don't do it yourself. You are forced to work through others. And the bigger the task, the more people are involved, the more politicians, the more locals, the more other experts, other architects, the achievement of bringing all these completely different, disparate forces and to do one thing with it. This is, I guess, displaying the slight romantic notion. Otherwise, I'm trying not to be very romantic at all, but that I think has incredible value to do things like that. And so in the rural is that opportunity for me, not just the rural, but in the edge of the developing world.
Yeah. Hold on. Trying to grasp. Wait. I mean, to the simplicity, or am I not the only one not grasping this? So you're saying that the simplicity and the collaborative nature of the work informs the seemingly simplicity of the form?
What I'm saying is that the collaborative nature of architecture and the work gives value in and of itself. That is the value for me of the process of architecture.
Yeah.
And the second thing is